Imagine our planet without its people. Imagine that every single human being has simply disappeared. This isn't the story of how that might happen. It's the story of what happens to the world we leave behind. In this episode of Life After People, humans have always liked to gamble, and the world's sin cities have uncertain futures. In Las Vegas, how quickly will these famous faces suffer a meltdown? What makes the wood of the Atlantic City boardwalk as durable as concrete? And what will be the fate of man's ultimate gamble? Welcome to the future of once crowded cities and an abandoned, silent funfair. Welcome to Earth. Population 0. One of man's most popular vices was to play the odds. In the time of humans, the streets of their gambling meccas were lined with outrageous spectacles and tributes to the great civilizations of the world. But these cities are built in hostile environments. Las Vegas springs from a barren desert. Atlantic City is perched on a storm-battered coast. Now that the final bets have been placed, can anything in either of these cities beat the odds? One day after people. In Las Vegas, the casinos are empty. But there's one place that still draws a crowd. In the time of humans, celebrities and dignitaries were immortalized in wax at the famous Madame Tussauds. Each lifelike figure was based on as many as 150 measurements. Melted wax was poured into plaster molds where it hardened into its final form. Hair was placed strand by strand. Now, works in progress will never be finished. In Las Vegas, more than 100 completed wax figures are displayed in a 30,000 square foot museum. The temperature is set at an ideal 70 degrees, for now at least. Two days after people. Power has started to fail along the Las Vegas Strip. And a new rat pack is prowling the streets. Rats have been a problem around Las Vegas since the 1990s. Experts believe they came in the palm trees shipped in to decorate hotels and housing developments. After people are gone, they find their way into the city's casinos, where they're more interested in searching for food than rolling dice. More than 2,000 miles away in Atlantic City, the only creatures strolling down the world-famous boardwalk are cats. In the time of humans, 18 colonies of feral cats already lived under the boardwalk. Human volunteers put out food for them on a daily basis. Without people, the future of these 140 felines is uncertain. The boardwalk itself might just beat the odds. Originally built in 1870, Atlantic Cities was the first beachside boardwalk in the United States. It's made up of 216,000 planks of wood and runs for over 4 miles. The earliest boardwalk was made of cedar, a wood so fragile it was dismantled and put into storage every winter to keep it out of the elements. The modern boardwalk is much tougher. Beginning in 1990, many sections were replaced with a South American hardwood called ipe, or Brazilian walnut. It's naturally resistant to insects, rot, and mold. It's one of the world's densest woods, with fibers packed so tightly it has the same fire rating as concrete. In June 2007, a fire that started under the boardwalk tore through local businesses. Some sections of the boardwalk, the parts made of pine, were destroyed. The hardwood was barely touched. Three days after People. Inside Madame Tussauds, glass eyes stare out at the empty hallways. When the power goes out, emergency lighting keeps the figures illuminated in the windowless galleries. But in the museum's utility rooms, the exhaust fans slow to a halt. The air conditioning cuts out, and the temperature begins to rise.
Inside the building, the upper floors will really compress the heat and be kind of like an oven. The wax figures will start to droop and sweat and melt.
Beeswax, the main component in these figures, begins melting at 115 degrees. Against these odds, Madonna has no chance, and within days, the material girl dematerializes. While the figure of Madonna melts, 6,000 miles away in Buenos Aires, the body of the woman she played in the film of the same name remains surprisingly intact. When Argentina's First Lady Eva Perón died in 1952, her body was preserved by a process that left a plastic-like film on her skin. Evita's husband was assured her body would never decompose. Today, Evita rests in a tomb 20 feet underground, said to be able to withstand a nuclear attack. Unlike Madonna's wax figure, Evita will be preserved as a living doll for many years to come. One week after People. 37.5 million people used to visit Las Vegas every year. Now, the streets are empty. Looming over the scene of desolation is the Stratosphere Tower. Part of a hotel complex, it's the tallest freestanding observation tower in America. At 1,149 feet, it is taller than the Space Needle and the Eiffel Tower. Its most distinctive features were the highest amusement rides in the world, including one that dangled visitors 64 feet over the edge of the tower on a mechanical arm. Now, the screams of thrill-seekers no longer echo across the Las Vegas Valley. In the time of humans, many of the iconic hotels of this city were demolished in seconds at the hands of man, clearing the way for bigger and more eccentric structures. Now, nature may act more slowly, but with no less violence. And at this amusement park in the heart of America, life after people has already begun. Two weeks after people. In Las Vegas, casinos that were once filled with the flashing lights and deafening clamor of slot machines are silent and dark. Although there are no humans to exterminate them, the new Rat Pack has plenty to fear. This dog may not look like a predator, but he's called a rat terrier for good reason. His breed was originally developed in the 1800s to hunt vermin, and he's better than most cats at catching small rodents. In the time of humans, American President Teddy Roosevelt was said to have used one of these dogs to eliminate rats from the White House.
Once the rat terrier got out, they'd be out there sniffing around, following mice, rats that you would have here in the Las Vegas area. There'd also be lizards and a variety of other kinds of species that were small that they would probably have the ability to capture.
Across the country in Atlantic City, the ocean continues to pound against the famous steel pier, as it has since 1898. Nearly as long as the Las Vegas stratosphere is tall, this attraction once hosted entertainers from W.C. Fields to Frank Sinatra, and even the Miss America pageant. Rebuilt in 1993, its concrete supports are in good shape, for now. Mankind's gambling meccas have always been fertile ground for strange architecture. Unlike skyscrapers and monuments, these bizarre structures were built to draw in customers today, not to stand for tomorrow. Near Atlantic City, the strangest of them all is Lucy the Margate elephant. Designed to attract investors to what was then an undeveloped stretch of sand, this 65-foot-tall pachyderm was completed in 1882, a year before the Brooklyn Bridge. But she's hardly an engineering marvel. Her fragile skeleton had to be rebuilt in 1973 at a cost of $124,000. That she lasted into the 21st century was a miracle.
Lucy's exterior shell is made up of wood covered with a tin sheathing. Being 100 feet away from the Atlantic Ocean, the structure requires constant maintenance. It needs to be stripped and painted every 3 years at a cost of around $65,000. Rotted wood needs to continually be replaced. Rotted tin panels need to be replaced all the time.
The last time Lucy was painted was 2002. By 2009, the deterioration was clear. On average, it rains every 3 or 4 days in Atlantic City, with wintertime bringing snow and ice. In the past, every time Lucy's future was threatened, concerned humans stepped in to save her. Now, she's on her own. The fragility of the architecture of amusement is clear. It's a story that is already being told at this abandoned amusement park in America's heartland. Welcome to the Americana Amusement Park in Lizardsville Lake, Ohio. In the time of humans, it was a thrill-seeker's paradise, drawing daily crowds of up to 10,000 people.
The park in its heyday was quite beautiful. It had a lot of vibrant colors. It was full of life and excitement. And today to see it, it's almost like a ghost town. It's very sad to see it in this state.
The park fell on hard times, and the gates closed in 2002, 80 years after they first opened. Just a few short years of abandonment have created a monster. Wood is rotting everywhere. Motors, bearings, and metal components are corroding. Gaping cracks permeate the park.
The annual freeze-thaw cycle that occurs in the Ohio Valley is very hard on things. Water tends to seep in cracks, freeze overnight. As the water expands, it applies loads that enlarge the cracks.
This amusement park tells us what will happen to the spectacles of Las Vegas and Atlantic City when people are gone. Like all amusement parks, it was once distinguished by bright colors. But protective paint steadily degrades beneath the sun's ultraviolet assault.
This entrance looks like it's painted in pastel colors, but at one point they were much more vibrant.
In less than a decade, the sun's ultraviolet radiation dims the paint to an atomic level. The sunlight makes oxygen already in the paint mix with the color pigments, which fade as a result.
The loss of pigment, the loss of volatiles within the paint is going to reach a point where the paint loses its elasticity, its ability to expand and contract with the material, and you'll see cracks. That's when the structural damage occurs.
Without humans to constantly repaint the park, its first layer of defense is gone. At its current rate of destruction, the Americana will soon become unrecognizable.
There's no fixed lifetime for the rides in an amusement park. In theory, they could last forever if they're inspected and repaired as damage occurs.
But the inspection is long overdue and the rides are beyond repair, especially this once proud roller coaster. The Screeching Eagle was the main attraction. Cars raced, plunged, and swerved at top speeds of 55 miles an hour on the 180-degree turns. What was once considered one of the best wooden coasters in America is now plunging towards complete collapse. But rotting wood is not the immediate enemy here. The coaster's support beams are made of chemically treated wood, so they'll resist rotting for several more years, longer than the mechanism that binds them together. A series of guy wires provides tension to the tallest section of track.
It's braided wire rope, and we can see parts of the rope where the strands are coming apart and actually breaking. So there are a few of these ropes that are poised for failure right now. The weakest link in this coaster is the fasteners. Something as mundane as the nails that hold the boards together. Over a single season, we see nails coming out. And when those go, that will permit the vertical members to undergo buckling collapse. It just needs that one push to start the dominoes falling.
With enough nails and guy wires loosened, a stiff wind will set off a dramatic collapse in the coaster's upper reaches. In time, every structure in the park will become a heap of rubble.
If everyone on Earth disappeared, within 10 years, this park would start deteriorating so bad, the buildings would start falling down, all the rust and the steel and the maintenance on all the equipment would just start deteriorating, and the concrete would be overgrown and being pushed up by plants and overgrowth. In a matter of 20 years, it would be unrecognizable.
As the years pass, few of man's familiar landmarks will be recognizable, and the absence of people will bring surprising changes, like water to places where there was nothing but desert. Two years after people, in Las Vegas, the climate of its Mojave Desert starts to produce a new kind of strange display as the parched desert reasserts itself.
In the Mojave, we like to say water is life.
In the time of humans, the city was lush with green gardens, fed by a water system holding nearly 700 million gallons in reservoir tanks scattered throughout the valley. Lake Mead, a primary water source, is 25 miles away. But without electric pumps, its water has been unable to reach the city. It rains only 4.5 inches a year here, and little will grow naturally besides the scrub of the Mojave Desert. 3 miles from the Strip, a one-time oasis stands as a natural reminder of the city's lush past. Springs Preserve is a museum built on the site where artesian springs were discovered in 1829. The springs made it possible for people to settle here. Las Vegas, in fact, means the meadows. The wells dug to tap the underground water have long gone dry.
The Las Vegas Spring started out as rainfall and snowmelt in the Spring Mountains.
But inside the visitor center, the voice of man still echoes in the halls.
Where it formed an aquifer, layers of rock and silt through which groundwater flows.
The museum exhibits don't get their electricity from the municipal grid. They're powered by the sun. Over 2,000 solar panels cover the car parks, generating 409 kilowatts of electricity.
The Las Vegas Spring started out as
This recorded narration is the last human voice heard in Vegas.
ground and flowed down the Las Vegas Valley, where it formed an aquifer.
5 years after people. In Atlantic City, inside the waterfront casinos, the city's feral cat population has found a new home.
What's really interesting about domestic cats, they're not like bobcats that don't tolerate others of their kind. The densities of house cats, domestic cats, can be very, very large, and I think over time they would set up a hierarchy and they would occupy these buildings.
Their new homes are dank, ghostly tombs. Cobwebs shroud the slot machines. Humidity from the outside encourages rot. Thick paper playing cards have curled and grown moldy in the dampness. The durable plastic poker chips, however, are unharmed, though they are covered with grime formed of dust and moisture. In the gloom of the casino, bats also find a place to live. In the time of humans, New Jersey was already home to 9 species of bats. Preferring to avoid human contact, most of them found homes in abandoned mines and tunnels, like the Hibernia mine, where thousands congregated every autumn and winter. Now, every casino is a potential bat cave.
Some of these buildings will end up being roosts, and for some species of bats, these colonies are limited only by the size of the cave that they live in. In this case, the cave would be a very large building.
Las Vegas Spring started out
10 years after people,
in the Spring Mountains.
a familiar voice begins to strain.
Flowed down the Las Vegas Valley, where it formed an aquifer, layers of rock and silt.
The solar cells in the car park of the Springs Preserve have kept the facility's power on for a decade now. But in order to operate efficiently, the panels need to be cleaned regularly.
Solar cells are great, but they don't last forever. Without people, the solar cells are going to fall prey to dust and debris, and they're going to degrade 7 or 8% a year. That means after 10 years, they will have lost more than half their power.
As the voltage dips, the lights dim, and the voice of man is silenced. It's 15 years after people. Down the coast from Atlantic City, Lucy the Margate elephant is on her last legs.
After people, the first thing that will happen to Lucy is her outer skin will begin to fail, and each piece of tin will eventually start to peel off and fall to the ground. But eventually, one good storm will weaken one leg. When one leg goes, the rest of Lucy will fall to the ground.
"50 years after people, Atlantic City's steel pier is just a skeleton. It looks much the way the old garden pier did in the time of humans. After the hurricane of 1944, the buildings were demolished and the pier's foundations never repaired. Built of reinforced concrete, the steel pier's caissons are strong, but not strong enough against the constant assault of the ocean.
Piers that extend into the ocean are already subject to the constant wearing away by the ocean. But the water has sand in it, as well as boards and other debris. This sand is essentially sandblasting the structure, and typically within 50 years, the structure is gone.
In Las Vegas, a city long known for giving second chances, a former star is making a surprise return engagement. Water. 50 years after people, rain has continued to fall in the surrounding mountains. Water from the mountains is flowing down to the Las Vegas Valley, where it permeates a porous layer below denser rock at the surface.
50 years after people, water will return to the valley in spots like this. This is an old well. It was built in the early 20th century. And because of groundwater pumping, basically the soil just sank down, so about 5 feet all the way down to here. And when water returns 50 years after people, little holes like that will be where the water comes out of.
Water's reappearance in Las Vegas will alter the landscape, but only gradually. In other parts of the country, change comes suddenly and violently. A hurricane is on its way up the coast towards Atlantic City.
The big one's coming in sometime in the next 100 years.
Much of the boardwalk is already buried under sand, but in the exposed sections, wind buffets the durable South American hardwood that has survived the years intact. Corroded metal fasteners weaken as the winds increase, and whole sections of the boardwalk are ready to give way.
Portions of the boardwalk will break up and become battering rams.
Seawater floods the buildings, soaking their framework with a heavy solution of salt that remains behind long after the storm ends.
The salt that's left behind sucks the water out of the air. The supports, now subject to salt, will constantly be re-wetted and corrode much faster than the rest of the structure. Since they're subjected to the heaviest loads, they'll start to fail, one by one, in a progressive failure. First one, then a second. After the first one goes, nothing will probably happen. But when the second and third columns go, you'll start to have what amounts to be a demolition of a building by explosives, but in slow motion, because only half of the building will fall, and then the middle, and the other half.
A 100 years after people, fine grains of wind-blown sand are erasing the welcome sign that once greeted visitors to the city of Las Vegas. The blowing sand is actually an unnatural consequence of man's presence here a century ago. Before Las Vegas was developed, most of the sand was held in place by a hard layer called the cryptobiotic crust. The crust is formed of soil particles held together by microbes, fungi, lichens, and mosses. Filaments from photosynthetic cyanobacteria spread out to bind specks of mineral material into a tough matrix. Man's shovels and bulldozers disrupted the crust, and without it, the winds blow the sand around unimpeded.
Wind gusts can be quite powerful in the valley. In fact, Las Vegas is well known for its windstorms. With wind comes sand blown about. Most of that results from us moving around through the desert. We've destroyed the cryptobiotic crust, which takes hundreds of years to come back. And because we've destroyed this crust, we get a lot of sand blowing about, and that causes erosion.
In Las Vegas, shafts of sunlight make their way into the giant atrium of the Luxor Hotel. When it was built in 1993, it was the tallest building on the Strip. Now, every one of the 28,500 panes in its glass skin are broken. The concrete structure inside remains, however, its shape giving it a natural stability.
We have seen the pyramids last for thousands of years, and in Las Vegas we have a simulation of a pyramid. That building is probably amongst the most stable structural systems that we can think of.
The increasing amount of wind-blown sand may be eroding the Luxor, but other particles of Earth have preserved its ancient Egyptian namesake, the Temple of Luxor. Originally built almost 3,500 years ago, the Temple of Luxor stands today because it was entombed in the layers of silt deposited each year by the Nile River. The river mud was a blanket, protecting the site not only from wind, earthquakes, and other hazards, but also from damage by vandals and treasure seekers. The site was largely buried until excavations in the late 19th century. Will Las Vegas be as lucky? "200 years after people. In Las Vegas, a desert thunderstorm rumbles in. Because Las Vegas often gets its total annual rainfall of 4.5 inches in 1 or 2 storms, flash floods are common.
There's 2 ways to die in the Mojave. You can die of thirst or you can die of drowning.
Floodwaters have rushed past the Las Vegas sign so much in the past 200 years that rust has started spreading into its support beams. Now, another weather hazard comes into play. The wind can blow up to 90 miles per hour here, and today, a powerful gust catches the city's old greeting sign like a sail. It torques the weakened supports to the breaking point, and the sign falls flat on the empty, crumbling road. "300 years after people. While the skylines of most cities are stripped of their iconic towers, there are some surprises in Las Vegas. Seen from a distance, the desert has preserved much of the familiar skyline. But the artesian water that began bubbling to the surface 250 years ago is bringing new life to the ruins in the desert.
It's kind of interesting to think about what life might be like in the valley after people. When water returns, the habitat will look very much like this area right here. We'll have quite a bit of vegetation growing around, scattered throughout the valley. It'll actually be quite lush.
Plants like the western honey mesquite grow in clumps along the strip, wherever the water happens to flow. But the new pockets of groundwater in Las Vegas wreak havoc on building foundations designed for the dry desert terrain. 300 years after people, the weakened foundation of the stratosphere will have to endure a thrill ride, courtesy of Mother Nature. Although neighboring California is notorious for earthquakes, Nevada experiences thousands of its own tremors every year. Faults near Las Vegas have the potential to unleash events as large as the 1994 Northridge quake that jolted Los Angeles.
If you look at a place like Las Vegas, it's a seismically active area. It has earthquakes. The buildings in Las Vegas, because it's a relatively dry climate, you might think would last a long time, but actually, many of them will be shaken down.
We could potentially have a toppling failure of a tower. If we lost the corner of the tower at its base and it tilted over, we could have the Leaning Tower of Pisa effect.
A violent quake lashes the tower back and forth like a whip. Losing support from its base, its fall seems agonizingly slow. The big observation pod hits the ground at 150 miles an hour, the entire tower smashing in a cloud of debris. A blanket of dust hangs over the city's remains. A place once called the Meadows is now a pile of rubble. Many of the odd animals imported into Las Vegas died quickly in the absence of humans. But in the distant future, the descendants of one creature just may beat the odds. And the messages man thought would last forever face destruction in the great expanse of time. It's been 1,000 years since the last bets were placed in the gambling meccas of Atlantic City and Las Vegas. Their long-term fates are not based on chance, but on the inevitable forces of nature.
1,000 years after people, even a trained eye would have trouble recognizing that there was ever a city in the Las Vegas Valley.
In the 10 centuries after people, Las Vegas is now little more than a jagged mound in the desert. Creosote bushes and other rough vegetation have colonized any remnants of buildings remaining under a 1,000-year layer of desert dust. It is this very vegetation that prevents the wind from forming sand dunes and burying the remains of the city even more deeply. "20,000 years after people. Subtle changes in Earth's orbit and the tilt of its axis have aligned to return the planet to an ice age. As ocean water is tied up in the planet's massive ice sheets, sea level drops almost 400 feet. In New Jersey, the entire continental shelf stands above sea level. Atlantic City is surrounded by an inland forest.
If I were standing in Atlantic City during the next ice age, I would see forests something like this. The ocean would be too far away to see.
In 1 million years, a number of ice ages have come and gone. The Nevada desert has gone back to looking much as it did when people gambled in Las Vegas. The city is long eroded away, but a vaguely familiar-looking creature reminds us that once there were humans here. The animal is descended from camels once kept at a ranch in Virginia City, 400 miles from Las Vegas. But with low-growing vegetation as its primary food, it has evolved into a new species, similar to the camel-like guanacos of South America.
Because of the habitat in Las Vegas, a new species of camel might be a little bit smaller in stature, probably a thicker insulating layer of fur because of the temperatures here. This new species of camel would probably be fairly quick. There's quite a few predators.
Though our gambling meccas are now all gone, one of man's greatest bets is still in play. It's not a gold coin, but a gold record aboard the Voyager spacecraft.
What if humankind will actually last 1 million years? One pretty sure bet is the Voyager spacecraft.
When the Voyagers were launched in 1977 to explore the solar system and beyond, each one carried a gold record containing sound and images from Earth, as well as greetings in 55 different languages, intended to inform other intelligent beings of our existence on the third planet from the Sun. But interstellar space is not a pure vacuum. It is filled with widely scattered gas molecules, dust, and micrometeoroids. After 300 million miles and 1 million years, the stuff of space takes its toll on Voyager. It's still recognizable, but in pieces and full of holes. Even the gold record is so damaged that there's little chance anyone who finds it will be able to play it. Like all of man's great gambles, this one has proved to be a long shot in a life after people.